under the wide, unbroken sky of the late 1800s, where dust and silence met in endless conversation, a cabin sat alone on the edge of the prairie. Its wooden bones creaked in the wind, its windows dulled with months of neglect. Inside, time had stopped moving long ago. The man who lived there, Dirk, a 34-year-old rancher with shoulders built from work and solitude, had long ceased to expect visitors. His world was measured in the rhythm of chores, the soft thud of horse hooves, and the sound of his own breathing in the dark. That morning, the wind carried the faint clatter of a wagon. Dirk looked up from the fence he was mending, the hammer still in his hand, and saw the outline of a woman stepping down from the cart. She was not what he expected. Full-figured, with a pale blue dress clinging softly to her shape, her bonnet tilted slightly in the wind. She carried a bucket, a broom, and a nervous kind of grace. Dust swirled around her ankles as she walked toward him, her boots leaving small, determined prints. "Old Marla sent me," she said quietly. Her voice was gentle, like someone afraid to break a silence too sacred to touch. "She said your cabin could use a good cleaning." Dirk said nothing for a moment. He studied her face, not with hunger or disdain, but with the puzzled caution of a man who no longer trusted his own eyes. Her name, she told him, was Diana. 24, she added after a pause, though she said it like a confession. She didn't wait for permission to work. She simply stepped inside the cabin, opened the windows, and let the light in. For the first time in years, sunlight touched the wooden walls. Dirk turned away, his jaw tightening. He didn't like the light or what it revealed. The dust, the cobwebs, the emptiness. He went back to the fence, pretending not to hear the soft sound of her broom or the low tune she began to hum. But something in that melody made his chest ache in ways he didn't understand. Inside, Diana worked methodically. She was not a timid woman, though her steps were careful. She cleaned the table, scrubbed the floor, polished the lantern glass until it shone. Every movement was deliberate, patient. She did not rush through tasks, as though she believed the cabin deserved gentleness. Sometimes she paused to look at the photographs lying crooked on the mantel, one of a woman holding a baby, faded with age. She did not touch it, but she felt its sadness. When Dirk came in at noon, the air smelled different, soap, wood polish, and something faintly sweet, like bread rising in a warm oven. Diana was kneeling by the hearth, her sleeves rolled up, strands of hair slipping free from her bonnet. He stopped in the doorway, unsure why the sight of her there, cleaning his forgotten world, made him feel both grateful and afraid. She looked up. "You've got a fine home under all this dust," she said softly. He grunted, sat at the table, and took his lunch without another word. But when she left that evening, he watched her wagon disappear down the road, the setting sun painting the world in gold. He told himself he didn't care if she came back. But when morning came and her wagon reappeared, something in him, something long buried, stirred. Days turned quietly into weeks. She returned each morning, her apron catching the breeze, her laughter like small sparks against the silence. She never pried into his grief, never asked about the photograph, but she treated the house as though it belonged to both of them. Once, she fixed a broken curtain rod. Another day, she left a loaf of bread on his table with a note that simply said you should eat more. He didn't answer, but he found himself finishing the whole loaf. The townsfolk noticed her wagon at his gate and whispered. "That rancher's gone soft," one man said. "Too lonely to turn her away," said another. But neither knew how loneliness looked from the inside, how it settled into your bones until even kindness felt dangerous. One evening, as she was sweeping the porch, a storm rolled over the horizon. The sky turned the color of pewter, the air heavy with the smell of rain. She turned toward the barn where Dirk was working. "You should come in," she called, her voice carrying through the wind. He hesitated, then joined her under the roof as the rain began to fall in wild sheets. They stood by the doorway, the sound of the storm wrapping around them like a shroud. She laughed softly. "You can almost hear the land sigh when it rains," she said. Dirk looked at her. "It's been a long time since I heard anything good out here." She smiled, faint and knowing. "Maybe you just stopped listening." Her words struck him harder than they should have. He stared out at the rain, his jaw working as if against an old ache. After a long silence, he spoke again, slower now. "My wife used to say something like that." Diana turned toward him, but he didn't meet her eyes. He told her then, haltingly, about the fever that took his wife and newborn in the same winter, about how the cabin had gone quiet after that, how he buried them by the oak tree, and how he'd stopped going to church because no prayer ever brought the wind to change direction again. She didn't say sorry. She simply stood beside him, her presence steady, her eyes deep with understanding. After that night, something shifted. He began talking to her in small ways about the horses, the crops, the weather. She began leaving small traces of care everywhere. Wild flowers in a tin can on the table, a mended curtain, a melody hummed while washing dishes. Dirk found himself waiting for her laughter the way he once waited for the rain. One afternoon, he returned early from the pasture to find her fixing a loose board on the porch. The sun lit her hair, and for a moment, he simply watched her. She looked different now, less like a stranger sent by someone else, and more like a piece of the world he had forgotten to claim. "Why do you keep coming back?" he asked suddenly. She glanced up, surprised by his voice. "Because this place deserves to breathe again," she said. "And maybe you do too." He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. She smiled softly and went back to her work. That night, after she left, Dirk sat by the fire and looked around the cabin. The walls seemed lighter. The air carried the faint scent of lavender from the cloth she used to clean. On the table sat a loaf of bread, another note tucked beneath it. "You can't fix what you won't touch," it said. He read it 3 times before blowing out the lamp. The next morning, he waited outside before dawn, the air cool and pale. When her wagon appeared, he felt his heart lift like a tired bird remembering flight. By the end of that week, the storm returned, stronger this time. The sky broke open with thunder. Diana was still in the cabin, trying to latch the shutters. The wind fought her, slamming the window back open. Dirk rushed to her side, his hand covering hers on the latch. Rain whipped through the gap, cold against their skin. They managed to close it, but when they turned toward each other, something hung in the space between them, alive, trembling, undeniable. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the lightning outside. "You should let someone care for you," she whispered. He stepped closer, his breath unsteady. "I don't know how anymore." "You just did," she said, and something in her voice, something quiet and certain, broke through the years of silence that had held him hostage. The storm roared, thunder shattering the sky, but inside the cabin, all he could hear was his own heartbeat. He took a breath that felt like it had been waiting years to be born. "Diana," he said, her name rough in his throat. "I don't have much left to offer. This land's tired, and so am I. But when you came here, it's like the world started moving again. I didn't think I could feel anything but loss, but you," he stopped, his voice catching. "You cleaned this place, and you cleaned me with it. I don't want to spend another day pretending you're just someone passing through." For a moment, the wind filled the silence between them, carrying the rain's rhythm like a heartbeat against the roof. Diana's eyes filled, not from surprise, but from something far deeper, a tenderness born of years of being unseen. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and touched his cheek. "Dirk," she said softly, "you don't need to offer anything. You just needed to be found." He closed his eyes, his hand covering hers. Outside, the rain slowed, softening to a whisper. The fire crackled in the hearth, warm and alive. When she finally spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "You already have, Dirk. You found me too." He pulled her gently against him, the warmth of her body grounding him in a way that no prayer or whiskey ever had. For the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel haunted. It felt whole. By dawn, the storm had passed. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the world smelled of new beginnings. Diana brewed coffee while he chopped wood, the rhythm of ordinary life suddenly sacred. He glanced toward her, sunlight catching her face, and realized the prairie no longer looked lonely. It looked alive. Outside, the wind carried a soft truth across the fields, that love doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a woman with a broom and a gentle heart, who walks into a broken man's silence and teaches him how to listen again. And somewhere beyond that endless stretch of horizon, two hearts that had once forgotten how to love began again, quietly, beautifully, as the prairie wind whispered its approval.